The dramatic escalation of nuclear rhetoric, initiated by Vladimir Putin, was intended as a calculated act of intimidation against the United States. Instead, it resulted in a geopolitical humiliation that proves his methods of nuclear blackmail are now obsolete. The core truth is that Putin attempted to leverage fear to gain diplomatic concessions, and the result was an immediate, damaging, and unpredictable counter-escalation from Donald Trump. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare, global affairs, and US domestic politics. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. Also, please watch this video to the very end, even if you play it in the background without sound, as your continuous viewing is critical to help promote the truth about the war. The incident began with Putin's public statement claiming the successful testing of two fantastical new strategic systems, the Poseidon nuclear-armed underwater drone and the Burevestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile. The actual military efficacy of these wonder weapons is highly questionable. They are essentially modernized, impractical relics of Cold War concepts. However, the political intent behind the announcement was transparent: to signal a willingness to break the long-standing status quo and use the specter of nuclear escalation to intimidate Donald Trump into compliance, specifically regarding the war in Ukraine and the lifting of sanctions. The result was a profound, immediate geopolitical fiasco for Moscow. Instead of achieving the desired fear or diplomatic concession, Putin's bluff triggered a diametrically opposite and highly unpredictable reaction. Donald Trump, interpreting the Russian statement as a direct, personal challenge, chose to ignore the technical nuances, that the Russian tests were likely non-nuclear trials of propulsion systems, and instead moved to assert overwhelming American dominance. He publicly announced that the United States would immediately return to conducting nuclear tests in response to the actions of other countries. This was a staggering counter-escalation that threatens to overturn decades of established international nuclear moratoriums. This aggressive counter-escalation is rooted in a fundamental psychological truth. The American leader is not governed by traditional diplomatic caution, but by the need to project absolute strength. Trump interpreted the Russian move not as a complex diplomatic signal, but as a direct challenge that demanded an overwhelming display of retaliatory force. He chose to ignore the nuanced reality and instead use the concept of nuclear testing as a trigger to affirm that he cannot be threatened. This event proves that nuclear blackmail is no longer a viable tool of Russian foreign policy. The era of the predictable response, where the West would simply issue strongly worded condemnations and hope for de-escalation, is over. Putin's use of nuclear rhetoric no longer induces Western paralysis, it now invites an unpredictable and dangerous counter-escalation. By attempting to frighten his opponent, Putin merely provoked a stronger, damaging response, confirming that the strategic initiative has been lost and that his threats accelerate rather than deter the crisis.
We have established that Vladimir Putin's nuclear bluff achieved the opposite of its intent. Now, we must confront the fundamental reason why these threats fail. The world no longer fears Russia's technological prowess because its arsenal is built upon institutionalized deception and technological stagnation. The threat is perceived as virtual, not real, because years of broken promises and falsified achievements have eroded all credibility. The ultimate symbol of this decay is the long-running saga of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile. The Sarmat has been touted by Putin for years as the cornerstone of Russia's modern nuclear deterrent, a massive, unstoppable system designed to bypass all defenses. Yet the reality is a clear, unyielding pattern of technological failure and political fraud. For years, the Russian leader and his ministers have repeatedly and publicly lied about the status of the missile, promising that the first serial missiles have been supplied to the troops and that the system was placed on combat duty as early as 2023. These bold declarations were simply political theater designed to project strength. The actual facts are devastating. Intelligence reports and open-source analysts have confirmed that the Sarmat has been plagued by test failures, with one reported launch culminating in the missile exploding during an attempted test, a profound, visible failure of a system designed to secure Russia's future. The consistent public claims of operational readiness were systematically contradicted by the missile's chronic inability to fly successfully. This pattern proves that the Russian High Command is structurally incapable of delivering on its grand technological promises. They are more concerned with producing politically favorable falsified reports than with producing functional weaponry. This technological stagnation extends to the recent nuclear threats. The systems Putin boasted about, Poseidon and Burevestnik, are not genuine technological leaps. They are functionally obsolete, exotic relics of Cold War concepts. They are expensive, impractical projects that solve no real strategic problem that the existing ICBM and submarine fleets have not already solved. This continuous investment in costly, low-value Wunderwaffen demonstrates that the military-industrial complex is driven by the internal politics of budget maximization and elite enrichment, not by the external strategic requirements of modern deterrence. The consequence of this reliance on a fraudulent technological base is terminal. Russia is structurally incapable of achieving the technological parity or advantage necessary to win a modern conflict. The world has witnessed the gap between the promise of an unstoppable arsenal and the reality of a battlefield dominated by cheap foreign-sourced drones and basic artillery. Putin is now trapped in a cycle where he must rely on his most unbelievable claims to maintain his international status. But by doing so, he only invites further scrutiny and ridicule, ensuring that his attempts at intimidation are met with skepticism and, as seen with Donald Trump, outright counter-escalation. The Russian state is being undone by the failure of its own technology and the hubris of its political leaders.
The culmination of Putin's failed strategy lies in a profound, persistent misjudgment of his primary rival. He believed Donald Trump was a predictable, naive political figure whom he could easily manipulate with flattery and lies. This fundamental error has cost Putin his diplomatic leverage and guaranteed the acceleration of American pressure. The initial diplomatic failure was born of this misjudgment. Putin, secure in his self-constructed information bubble, consistently treated engagement with Trump not as a good faith negotiation, but as an opportunity for political theater and personal gain. He squandered the opportunity for a face-saving ceasefire, believing he could simply stonewall Trump and then offer the deal later on better terms. The events, from the cancellation of the expanded talks at the Anchorage summit to the stream of false promises about quick battlefield victories, systematically destroyed the basis for any relationship built on trust. Putin's continuous reliance on deceit and the demonstrable failure of his military to match his political promises was interpreted by Trump not as diplomatic complexity, but as a fatal flaw, a sign of fundamental weakness that needed to be punished. The crucial consequence of this failure was the unexpected nature of Trump's counter-reaction. Putin believed he understood the political calculations of his opponent. He assumed that any aggressive action would be met with fear and a desire for de-escalation, as had been the pattern with previous administrations. Instead, he encountered a leader whose political currency is strength and whose instinct is purely retaliatory. When Putin attempted to regain the initiative by deploying the ultimate threat, the nuclear bluff, with the Burevestnik and Poseidon systems, the result was a catastrophic misfire.
Trump, lacking the cautious nuance of traditional foreign policy experts, did not bother to verify the technical reality of the threats. He simply responded to the word nuclear with a raw, immediate display of competitive dominance, publicly vowing that the US would resume its own nuclear testing. This move neutralized Putin's most potent tool of coercion. It proved that nuclear threats no longer induce paralysis, they induce a stronger, more assertive counter-escalation. The language that Putin understands, the demonstration of unwavering, uncompromising power, is now being spoken directly to him. The failure of this political gambit is complete. Putin's attempts to butter up Trump with misplaced praise and soft language regarding the new sanctions were also ineffective. Trump's political instinct demands validation. He needs to prove that his actions are consequential and that his adversaries respect his power. By reacting to the sanctions with feigned indifference, Putin merely fueled Trump's desire to prove the sanctions are in fact devastating. This cycle of political miscommunication has ensured that every move Putin makes to regain control only serves to accelerate the imposition of sanctions and the transfer of military capabilities to Ukraine. The structural rigidity of Putin's autocratic system is no match for the retaliatory instinct of a leader who views international politics as a high-stakes, personal vendetta.
We have analyzed the political failure of Putin's nuclear bluff, but the final critical error is a fundamental misreading of modern military strategy. The endless promotion of new exotic delivery systems like Burevestnik and Poseidon is strategically meaningless because the era of the offensive arms race is effectively over. The true, ongoing competition is now exclusively focused on air defense and missile defense systems. The core principle behind this shift is the concept of mutually assured destruction. Both the United States and Russia long ago surpassed the necessary threshold for strategic deterrence. The existing arsenals of intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear submarines, and long-range bombers already provide a guaranteed second strike capability. They possess sufficient firepower to wipe out each other's cities, infrastructure, and command centers multiple times over. This platform of guaranteed mutual annihilation means that adding a marginal new system, whether it's a subsonic nuclear-powered cruise missile or a gigantic slow-moving underwater drone, does not change the strategic balance by a single fraction. For Putin to invest billions in Burevestnik is merely to purchase a new Ferrari when the highway is already closed by an irreversible gridlock. The real, urgent arms race today is defensive. The focus has entirely shifted to developing countermeasures capable of intercepting and neutralizing these massive stockpiles of incoming missiles and drones. The key question in modern warfare is not, can I hit them, which has been answered with a resounding yes for decades, but can they stop me? The pursuit of effective, near 100% successful missile defense is the holy grail of modern military science. Until a system emerges that can reliably intercept a massive, coordinated salvo of ICBMs and cruise missiles, the defensive arms race will continue. Therefore, Putin's continued investment in the Burevestnik and Poseidon projects is a monumental act of fiscal folly and political deceit. These programs are technological dead ends that consume billions of dollars serving only two purposes. First, to enrich the corrupt defense industrial complex, the inevitable budgetary sinkhole, and second, to provide political theater for a domestic audience that doesn't understand the strategic irrelevance of the weapons. While the state pours money into building the largest nuclear-powered drone that the world doesn't need, the crucial operational front, the war in Ukraine, is being lost due to a critical deficit of cheap FPV drones, counter-battery radar, and localized air defense systems. By attempting to revert to the obsolete strategic language of the Cold War, Putin exposes the fundamental strategic blindness of his command. He is wasting vast resources on a problem that has already been solved, neglecting the real technological gaps that are actively costing his soldiers their lives on the Ukrainian front. This strategic misallocation of resources is a clear sign that the Russian state is driven by political showmanship rather than military necessity.
The terminal analysis of the past few weeks is clear. Vladimir Putin's core strategy of combining military aggression with high-stakes nuclear blackmail has spectacularly failed, and that failure has guaranteed a decisive shift in the conflict. The American strategy has now moved past deterrence and into pure financial coercion. The war will end not because of a breakthrough on the front, but because the Kremlin will be driven to insolvency. The initial defining strategic reversal was the collapse of the nuclear bluff. Putin attempted to use his exotic, non-existent wonder weapons to intimidate Donald Trump into diplomatic concessions. The result was a catastrophic miscalculation. Trump's unpredictable yet highly effective countermove, his public vow to resume nuclear testing, proved that the era of Russian nuclear intimidation is definitively over. This single event neutralized the Kremlin's most powerful lever of influence, confirming that global stability is no longer threatened by Moscow's bluster. With the diplomatic threat eliminated, the entire focus of the U.S. administration has now shifted to accelerating Russia's financial ruin. Trump, having been personally provoked, has every political incentive to prosecute this financial war relentlessly. The recent imposition of direct, crippling sanctions on major oil exporters, the financial lifelines of the war machine, is the start of a sustained, systemic campaign. This is not about moral condemnation. It is about cutting off the oxygen supply. The success of this strategy is already visible. Major oil customers are hesitant to trade, and the massive revenue streams funding the war are drying up. This economic reality dictates the final outcome. Putin has been stripped of his viable levers of power. His military is bogged down, his technological claims are revealed as fraudulent, and his diplomatic threats are met with scorn. He no longer controls the agenda. He merely reacts to the crises created by his opponents. The only certainty remaining for the Russian state is the accelerating economic crisis. Budget deficits are soaring, inflation is rampant, and the industrial capacity is stalling. The conclusion is inescapable. The financial dead end is the ultimate factor of collapse. Putin's further actions will only serve to hasten this economic decline. The only path left for the Russian leader is to accept a ceasefire to prevent the complete and total insolvency of his regime. The war will conclude not through negotiation from a position of strength, but from a position of absolute financial necessity on terms dictated by the democratic world.